Hey, this is RJ May, and you're watching Mr. Mario 2011.
Hey, so what is going on, everyone? It is me, Mr. Mario, and with this commentary, I hope I do entertain some of you all out with some childish lies and all that. About what? About video games. Anyways, I'd randomly thought of this because I was kind of thinking back on just complete BS stories I heard, on the playground, growing up and all that, about video games. Now, I'd started, gaming and all that when I was in 3rd grade or so, and there were times here and there I wouldn't play anything for like 6 months or a year at a time, something like that. But there were always people, even before I was playing games, like I always heard my friends who were talking about games with each other because all my friends played video games. They had like a Nintendo, a Super Nintendo at the very least. They had educational games on their PCs, anything like that. So everyone was talking about games. But I don't know what it was because for some reason, people always felt the need to lie about what they did in games. Not even just what they did. People just felt the need to lie about what they had found in games, even what types of games they played, anything like that. So none of these are my stories. These are stories I've either heard or I have witnessed, but these are attributed to many people that I have grown up with over the years. And honestly, the lies have really, stopped once everyone got to, like a middle school, high school and all that. But it was really elementary school where you just hear some of the just wildest things. Some of the wildest things, which I'll just go ahead and get into it now. So, first off, there was one kid. We're going to call him John, right? Now, this kid lived in the same complex as my mom. At one point. So what ended up happening was, whenever I'd visit my mom, I'd see this guy, and he was like a year or two younger than me, something like that. And this was when I was in, I want to say 7th grade. So this had to be like 2004 or so when all this was going on, 2004, 2005, something like that. So what ended up happening was, this was the time where this is where the PS2, the Xbox, the GameCube were still popular. Well, GameCube is, of course, falling off like every Nintendo system does, unfortunately. But what ended up happening was, this was before the Xbox 360 had, no, at the time, the 360 it might have been out. No, I believe it was out. I want to say, I don't know. I want to say it was out at this point, but I don't remember if these stories with him, the Xbox 360, was out at that time. This more pertains to the PlayStation, though. I'm going to be talking about that. Now, first off, I think almost everybody knew some type of kid like this. Apparently, this guy had said that his uncle worked for Sony. And his uncle had the PlayStation 3 already. So this was like, a year before the system was supposed to come out, a year and a half, something like that. So, looking at it from, a realistic perspective, okay, maybe his uncle worked at Sony. He had a development kit of some kind, anything like that. I didn't even know about dev kits or anything like that when I was younger. But I already called BS on this. I was like, your uncle does not work for Sony. Because, honestly, one, I really doubted anyone in our town did. And two, I almost feel like his family would have been a little better off because they didn't have too much money. And I'm not, it's either here nor there. I'm not even ragging on them for it. But I'm just saying, that was the fact of the matter right there. But he was trying to tell me that, his uncle worked for Sony, and he had the PS3, and we'd already seen footage of the PS3 and all that, so he's like, yeah, no, the graphics are really good on the system. I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm sure they are. Then he was also trying to tell me that his uncle also had the PlayStation 4. Now, granted, this was before the PS3 had even come out, and he was telling me, yeah, my uncle also has a PS4, and the thing is, like, the graphics look really realistic. And I was like, you just said the graphics on the PS3 looked realistic. He's like, no, but these are like, Danny, these are like really, really realistic graphics. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So what ends up happening was he was telling me, he's like, yeah, no, whenever I visit my uncle, I'm able to play on his PS3. I was like, well, what about the PS4? Oh, the PS4 broke. That's convenient. And I was like, well, why don't you bring the PS3 over here? And he was like, well, no, I can't because it's my uncle's. And I'm like, okay, well, can't you even just bring it over here for like an hour sometime just so, you could show me something? He's like, well, it's broken, so I can't bring it. I'm just like, okay, I quote-unquote believe you. All right. Now, the funny thing is, remember where I just said his uncle worked at Sony? Well, apparently, his uncle also worked at Microsoft and somehow also had the new unreleased Xbox that was out. And I was just like, wait, so you're telling me your uncle works for Sony and Microsoft? And he just nodded, he was calm. He's like, yep, he does. I'm like, okay, man, it blows my mind how kids are such easy liars. It's crazy. Like they turn these stories over in their heads, and I kind of did the same thing a few times when I was a kid, and I don't know how, but it's just like that happens, and it's funny to see. There was also another time him and I were talking, and we ended up saying that, like, we were talking about Halo. We were talking about the first Halo Combat Evolved, and he was trying to tell me, he's like, hey, Danny, so there was one time I was playing it on my Xbox, right? And I don't know where, but I went into some cave, and I found an axe. And I was like, no, you did not find an axe in there. He's like, no, I didn't cheat. I didn't, like, do anything. I found an axe. That was it. And I had already known about game modding and all that at this point, so I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe if it was the PC version, you could get a mod for it, but no, there's definitely not an axe in the Xbox version of Halo, and if somebody finds that down below in the description, like, I'll just be completely mind blown. But granted, I really, really, really doubt he had found an axe in there. Now, what ended up happening as well, this is, I guess, the last story about John specifically. He ended up... it was another one of my friends who lived right next door to John in the same complex, and he was telling me about some stuff John had said, you know, some lies and all this stuff. And my other friend, well, you know, he doesn't even need a name for this, it's fine. But what happened, he was telling me, he's like, oh, dude, John just lies all the time about games. And I was like, yeah, I know. He's like, well, okay, well, guess what? This is like a few years later. He's like, well, John told me he had an Xbox 360. I was like, well, does he? He's like, no, he doesn't. And I asked what happened. He was like, well, you know, John and I were outside, and he's like, oh, I have an Xbox 360. And I asked, you know, hey, can I play on it? Can I check it out? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. Like, this is what I don't understand, okay? Then he followed through with it. He's like, oh, yeah, sure. I just need to ask my mom if you can come in. So John goes inside his apartment, asks his mom if my other friend can come in. His mom says, okay, so he comes in. He's like, oh, where's the Xbox? He's like, it's in my room. We got to go upstairs. So John and my friend go upstairs to John's room. There's no Xbox there. He's like, John, where's the Xbox? He's like, oh, I forgot. It's actually at my uncle's. Yeah, sure. Okay, that's enough about John. I'll go ahead and tell another story here. This one was actually told by me, told to me by some guys who were over at GameStop. Now, we used to have a GameStop in our mall, ended up closing up shop because we had way too many GameStops in a local vicinity, and their, not their expiration, but their lease ended up ending first out of all the GameStops available. So this is what ends up happening, okay? I'm there with some friends one day. I think this is when I was like 16 or 17, something like that. And this was when I had been working at a game store for a bit. So, you know, sometimes I would actually like talk to, you know, people at other game stores and all that. So I'm talking to the manager of this GameStop and another guy there. And what ended up happening was they start telling me, because we start telling about, you know, lies that people come in and tell us. And apparently this guy had been told that there was somebody who came in who had the original Halo on PlayStation 2. So he starts painting a picture for me, okay, about the original Halo. Apparently what happens is this guy comes in, they start talking, he's like waiting for his girlfriend or something. So he's talking with the manager, who I was currently talking with, and there was another guy. And I think the other guy who was in the story was also present to verify everything that was said. So essentially, the manager, they're talking, and he knew he was lying. He knew 100% that this guy was lying. But this guy said, oh yeah, I got Halo on PS2. And the manager's like, wait, really? You got it on PS2? He said, yeah, no, I got it on PS2. He's like, wait, like, how is it? And, you know, he's talking to him about it and everything. And then he said, well, do you think you can, like, bring it by for us to check out? And the guy's like, oh, no, I can't. I don't have it. And they're like, but you just said you have it. And he's like, no, it's over at my cousin's house. And they're like, okay, well, can you get it from your cousin and then bring it by so we can check it out? Because we're not going to try and steal it from you or anything. All we want to do is just play it for a few minutes and, you know, just see how it is on the PS2 and see how it is with the PS2 controller and everything. That's honestly all we want to do. And the guy's like, no, I can't get it from my cousin's house. There's a recurring thing with these stories as well, too, where the person who lies, once they get trapped in that lie, they start falling back on my uncle or my cousin got it. But anyways, what ends up happening is this guy keeps saying, you know, it's over at my cousin's house. So my manager, like, not my manager, but the manager over at this GameStop ends up putting like $50 on the table. And he says, okay, I'll tell you what, if you go over to your cousin's house, you get the game, you bring it over here and let us play it for like an hour, I'll give you $50. And the guy's like, no, I can't. And then the other guy, he's overhearing, he comes over, he's like, wait, Halo on PS2? I want to try that as well. So he puts down another $50 on the table. And they're just like, okay, dude, we're going to pay you $100 just to let us play this game for 1 hour. That's all we want to do. And this guy's still saying no. They got this guy up to $200. They had $200 down on the table, and they said, look, all you need to do is go over to your cousin's house, pick up the game, bring it back, just let us play it for an hour. And we'll give it back to you, and you'll be $200 richer. And this guy's like, no, I can't do it. And then, eventually he just left. He walked out of the store, all that stuff. But, I mean, hey, if that guy had a copy of Halo on PS2, he could have been $200 richer that day. Of course, that didn't happen. Now, also another thing in elementary school was occasionally you would run into people who either had a modded system, or they knew family members that could mod their systems, or they knew a little bit about modded systems. Now, some of you might or might not know, but I had been modding since I was in early to late elementary school, something like that. Probably mid to late elementary school, I want to say. So I knew about mod chips, things like that. I knew how to get, just any type of, get other OSs running, especially on the original Xbox platform, because that was the big modding device back in the day, aside from PC, but I really didn't play on PC or anything like that. Now, there was another guy. There's two stories with him here. We're going to call him David. Now, David and I had been talking, and I remember there was one time, him and we were talking with another person, and what happened was we were talking about Xboxes and everything, and he was trying, David was on the side saying, the Xbox is better than the PS2, and I don't remember, I think I was just neutral on it, whatever it was. So what happens is we start talking and everything, and he was saying, he's like, yeah, I know somebody, I think it was a cousin or something, he's like, yeah, my cousin can mod Xboxes as well too, so he could put a little chip inside of them, and then, you can copy your games over, and you could rent a game and copy, so that way they're better because they have hard drives in them and everything. And what ends up happening is, I said, and this was a legitimate thing. I said, also, if you have, I think this other kid, he said that, you can play DVDs on the PS2. You don't have to buy an extra remote or anything, because he had to do that on the original Xbox. It sucked. But what ended up happening was I said, well, if you mod your Xbox, there's actually a program you could download, and it comes on most soft mod installers, and you're able to just watch DVDs directly off there. And Dave was just like, yeah, exactly. And see, Danny, I don't know if you heard about this, but if you install a mod chip in your system, you can also burn CDs too. And I'm like, what the fuck? Where did that come from? That is the first thing I thought of. So yeah, no, I had never heard that from anywhere else, but apparently, according to him, if you mod an original Xbox, it can burn CDs. For anybody wondering, that's completely not true. Now, David had also told me that he knew people at GameStop, and I think he was trying to tell me that you could bribe, but he didn't know the terminology behind it, but you can't. Most of the time, you cannot do this at GameStop. For anybody that does or doesn't know, most of the time, people who are able to buy games early from GameStop or anything like that, that generally does not happen. Due to the fact that the employee, they're automatically gone if that happens, and the game store can also get punished as well too for selling early. So most people are trying not to get fired from their jobs or lose their jobs or anything like that, even if they don't like them. Now what ended up happening was, this was before Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out. So we're all talking about it, and he was just like, yeah, no, you can actually go there, and if you pay them $5 or $10 more, you can get the game early. And I was like, no, you can't. He's like, no, I know somebody that did it, and my cousin did it, and you could do it this way. And apparently he was saying, the general thing he was saying was, I remember the funny thing was, he told me, he's just like, yeah, no, if you pay off the game now, so if you pay them $50 now, and you come back in a week, they'll give you the game. And what ended up happening was, at one point, I didn't believe it, but, me being, an 11, 12-year-old, I was still slightly skeptical about it, of course, like everything else in the world. So what ends up happening was, I go over to GameStop, within a week or something like that, and I start asking the employees, I was like, hey, so one of my friends told me that if you pay for, if I give you all the money for San Andreas right now, the next time I come into the store, I can get it early. And let's say the release date was, April 20th or something like that. 420. But anyways, let's say it was that. And then the employees kind of just look at each other and they're kind of smiling and laughing a bit. They're like, well, if you give us all the money for it, and the next time you come in is April 20th when the game comes out, I mean, technically your friend would be right, but you're not going to get the game early. So yeah, there were always stories like that of kids getting games early, anything like that. Now, another thing was, I remember this was in like first grade. Apparently, like we had a real cool arcade in the mall over here that ended up shutting down as well too. It got replaced. But what ended up happening was my friend was trying to tell me that there was some game that he found in the mall where it was like an actual like car, and you could go in and like it would like flip you around and all this other stuff. Sounded super unsafe but super awesome at the same time. But he was trying to tell me that he went into one of the back rooms of the arcade and he found it there, and it only costed a token, all this other stuff. I didn't believe him, but of course, me being a kid, I had to make sure everything was right. So the next time I went to the arcade, I even asked the employees there, and they told me no, that was complete BS. It wasn't a thing. They had no idea what this kid was talking about at all. I'm just imagining like all these places I go to, just thinking, how this kid is like asking these outlandish questions and everything. And I'm sure it's not even the first or second or even third time they had heard anything like this. But no, aside from that, I guess the only other things I can think of, one of them was from third grade. Another one I had read online pretty recently. Now, there was this one kid I knew, I remember it might have been actually second or third grade. That was when the first Harry Potter movie came out. And I knew some friends who, I didn't have a system at the time, but I knew several friends who were playing it on PS1. And one of my good friends, he beat every single game he got. Like, this dude was like the master of PS1 games, at least for our class. Like, he had like 20, 30 games, every single one he had finished multiple times. Like, he was the gamer of the classroom. And what happened was him and another friend of mine kept talking about the Harry Potter game. So they both got it, for Christmas, and they're talking about it, and one of my first friend had beat it already, and the second friend was like, oh yeah, I beat that too. Now, my second friend was also a known liar, but he seemed to have all the pieces put together. He said he beat the game, he could tell you who the final boss was, he could tell you, how he attacked and everything, so I'm just like, okay, I kind of believe him. Now, a few weeks later, we're hanging out. Like, I'm over at his place, we're playing PlayStation, Super Nintendo games, all this other stuff, just hanging out, eating junk food, drinking sugary drinks, having a good time like kids do. And what happened was, I asked him, I was like, oh, hey, so that Harry Potter game, did you beat it? He's like, well, I kind of beat it. And granted, before then, he was like all excited that he beat it. And I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean you kind of beat it? He's like, well, I never really saw the ending. The closest I ever got was I ended up killing Voldemort, and Voldemort killed me at the same time. I'm just like, so you didn't really beat the game? He's like, no, I beat the game because I killed the final boss. And I'm like, but the credits never roll, you never beat the game. But he was trying to insist on him beating it. Now, the last thing, this is not a childhood story or anything like that, and I guess one of my others wasn't, because one of them I told you from high school, but that would have been like years and years ago. Not the high school thing, I mean, that was a few years ago, but just the whole Halo on PS2 thing happened way before then. But anyways, this was another thing I had read, and I read about this online, and I had to include this story in here because it just seemed like such a grade school recess rumor that you would hear. Now, for anybody who's tired of me talking about the Sega Saturn, deal with it, okay? Normally when I get a new system or anything like that, I'll be researching it a ton. I just have like a little bit of a minor obsession with whatever it is. Now, what ended up happening was, apparently, I looked online. In case you don't know, there's this one game called Shenmue. Very good game. There's Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2. People have been begging for a Shenmue 3. Shenmue 1 originally started development on the Sega Saturn, and there's actually some beta footage or alpha footage that you can see of the original Shenmue running on the Saturn. And honestly, for a console from 1995, it is damn impressive. However, it was just such a big game, and it cost way too much, and it couldn't be run on the Saturn. Also, the Saturn was dead within 2 or 3 years, so they end up, putting it out on the Dreamcast. And the Dreamcast, it succeeded a decent amount on there, but, that's a whole nother story. Pretty much what ended up happening was somebody was asking online, there are threads about people, trying to get a hold of alpha and beta copies of the original Shenmue and all these other things. And apparently there was this one guy, I'd say he was kind of well known on this forum. I can't even remember the forum, but you can Google search it, just look up like Sega Saturn, Shenmue, alpha or beta or something. Beta, not beta. But what ends up happening is this guy came up and he was like, hey, so I was able to get a beta copy of Shenmue on the Saturn. It's 8 discs and it is 89% complete. However, there are a few things that are broken on it, so I'm going to try fixing them up as well. And people were just freaking out. They're like, wait a minute, how can we tell you're legit? And he's like, guys, like, I'm not going to go through this effort for nothing. 6 of the 8 discs are uploaded right now. I'm just waiting to rip the other 2 discs, but that'll be later today. So people are freaking out, and the other half of people are like, wait a minute, hold the phone. This is a game that's mysteriously been lost for like more than a decade. And now this guy is randomly coming out saying he has an 8-disc copy of this game that is near complete, and he's willing to bring out that old mid-90s code and fix up this game. This is complete BS. One of the issues here is that this issue can't be fixed. Another thing is they were nowhere near close to finishing the game on the Saturn. If it was close to being finished, they would have just released it on the Saturn. So people were calling him out, and then he was just like, he came up, and he's like, yeah, well, I mean, you all can call me a liar, but I just uploaded all 8 discs. And then people are like, well, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. Where are the discs? A few hours later, I think, or maybe a few days. I can't remember. I didn't look at the timestamps, but this guy, same guy, posts again. And he's just like, guys, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this happened. I left my computer on. My younger brother found my account on here, and he started posting on here. Can you all just please lock and delete this thread? So that is just one of those really big, old childhood gaming rumors that has come to fruition on the internet. And I'm sure this guy's brother was quite young as well, too, to make up all this stuff. Anyways, those are all my stories. So those were a ton of stories just combined into one. I hope you all enjoyed this long commentary. You know what? The commentary was long, but as I said, that was like at least, 6 stories minimum. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you for watching, everyone.